Dr. Elena Rodriguez pressed her face against the viewing port of the UES horizon and stared at the strange planet below. Kepler 442b looked like a dead world from space, with its gray surface and thin atmosphere. But the energy readings coming from the southern continent told a different story. Something was down there, something old and powerful that had been waiting for millions of years. She turned away from the window and walked to the bridge where Commander Ryan Brooks was reviewing the landing protocols with his team. Ryan was a tall man with serious eyes who never smiled much, but Elena knew he cared about keeping everyone safe. Next to him stood Professor Jacob Miller, a thin man with messy hair who could read ancient languages better than anyone in human space. Dr. Lisa Chang sat at the science station, her fingers dancing over the quantum analysis displays as she tried to make sense of the impossible energy signatures they had detected. "The readings are getting stronger," Lisa said without looking up from her screens. "Whatever is generating this power has been active for at least 3 million years, possibly longer. The technology required to maintain that kind of energy output is beyond anything we understand." Elena nodded and checked her equipment one more time. As the chief xenorchaeologist for the Colonial Research Division, she had studied alien ruins on dozens of worlds, but nothing had prepared her for what they might find on Kepler 442b. The initial probe data showed structures that defied current understanding of physics and engineering. "Are you sure about this, Elena?" Ryan asked as he reviewed the security protocols. "The energy patterns down there are unlike anything we have encountered. My job is to keep this team safe, and I cannot do that if we do not know what we are walking into." Elena understood his concerns, but the potential discovery was too important to ignore. The readings suggest a massive complex buried beneath the surface. If this is another Elder One site, it could answer questions that have puzzled xenorchaeologists for decades. Every species in the galaxy has legends about these ancient builders, but we have never found a complete site before. Jacob looked up from his translation work. The probe images show symbols carved into the exposed sections. I have been comparing them to our database of known Elder One scripts, and there are definitely similarities. But there is something strange about these markings. They look familiar in a way that does not make sense. The landing shuttle descended through the thin atmosphere and touched down near the edge of the ruins. Elena felt her heart racing as she stepped onto the surface of the alien world. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, and the air was breathable thanks to ancient atmospheric processors that still functioned after millions of years. The ruins stretched for kilometers in every direction, with massive stone blocks arranged in complex geometric patterns. The architecture was unlike anything Elena had seen before, yet something about it felt oddly familiar. The proportions seemed designed for beings roughly human-sized, and the doorways and corridors were the right height for people like her team. "This is incredible," Lisa whispered as she ran her scanner over one of the stone blocks. "The material is not native to this planet. The atomic structure suggests it was created using matter manipulation technology that we can barely theorize about. These builders could reshape reality at the molecular level." Jacob was already working on the symbols carved into the nearest wall, his brow furrowed as he studied the ancient script. "Elena, you need to see this. These symbols are not just similar to human writing systems. Some of them are identical to characters found in ancient Sumerian and Egyptian texts. But that is impossible, because those civilizations developed on Earth millions of years after these ruins were built." Elena joined him at the wall and studied the carvings. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized several symbols from her own studies of Earth's ancient history. The mathematical notations were particularly clear, using a base 10 system that seemed specifically designed for beings with 10 fingers. "There has to be an explanation," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe the Elder Ones influenced early human development on Earth. Maybe they visited our planet and taught our ancestors these symbols. Ryan was monitoring the area for any signs of danger when his scanner detected a large chamber beneath their feet. There is something directly below us. The scan shows a room about 50 meters down with what looks like intact technology. The energy readings are off the charts. The team used their portable drilling equipment to create an access shaft down to the buried chamber. Elena was the first to descend, her headlamp cutting through the darkness as she reached the bottom. What she found there would change everything humanity thought it knew about itself. The chamber was enormous, with walls covered in crystalline panels that pulsed with soft blue light. At the center of the room stood a massive crystal matrix, easily 3 meters tall and humming with barely contained energy. But it was the symbols covering every surface that made Elena's hands shake as she recorded them. They were not just similar to human writing. They were human writing. Ancient human scripts mixed with mathematical formulas and star charts that showed the galaxy as it existed millions of years ago. The genetic markers embedded in the crystal technology matched human DNA perfectly, down to the smallest detail. "This cannot be right," Lisa said as she ran test after test on the crystal matrix. "The technology here predates human civilization by millions of years, but everything about it suggests human origin. The proportions, the interface design, even the way the controls are arranged. It is all designed for human hands and human minds." Jacob had gone very quiet as he translated more of the wall inscriptions. "Elena, these are not just symbols. They are names. Human names from languages that developed on Earth, but written here millions of years before those languages should have existed. And there are coordinates, thousands of them, pointing to locations across the galaxy." Elena made the decision that would change everything. She reached out and touched the central crystal. The moment her fingers made contact, the entire chamber exploded with light and the crystal matrix activated. Holographic displays filled the air around them, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with thousands of points, marked in the same pulsing blue light. Each point matched the coordinates of known Elder One sites that various alien species had discovered over the centuries. But now Elena could see the truth that had been hidden for millions of years. These were not alien ruins at all. They were human ruins, built by humans who had somehow been in space long before Earth's recorded history began. The crystal matrix pulsed brighter, and Elena felt something stirring deep in her mind. Memories that were not her own began to surface, showing her images of vast human cities among the stars and technologies that made current science look primitive. The other team members were experiencing the same thing, their faces showing confusion and wonder as ancient knowledge began to awaken in their minds. As the crystal's power grew stronger, Elena realized they had not just discovered an ancient site. They had triggered something that had been waiting for millions of years to be found by the descendants of its builders. The Elder Ones that every alien species feared and revered were not aliens at all. They were humans, and they were coming home. The news from Kepler 442b spread through human space like wildfire. Within hours of Elena Rodriguez's team uploading their initial findings, every major news network across the colonies was running stories about the impossible discovery. The images of human-like ruins millions of years old and the crystal matrix activation caused panic and confusion on every human world. On Mars Colony, construction worker Mike Johnson stopped in the middle of his shift as strange images flashed through his mind. He saw massive ships moving between the stars and cities that floated in space, all built by hands that looked exactly like his own. The memories were so vivid that he could smell the recycled air of those ancient vessels and feel the hum of technologies that his conscious mind could not understand. Dr. Amy Foster was working late in her psychology lab on Luna Station when the first wave of reports started coming in. People across human space were calling medical centers and government offices, all describing the same phenomenon. They were remembering things that had never happened to them, seeing places they had never been, and knowing facts about the galaxy that no human should possess. Amy pulled up the medical files as they poured in from across the colonies. On Europa Station, teacher Nancy White had suddenly started speaking in a language that linguists could not identify, but somehow other humans who heard the recordings understood every word. On Titan Base, engineer Carlos Martinez had drawn detailed blueprints for a faster-than-light drive that was centuries ahead of current human technology, even though he had no formal training in advanced physics. The Colonial Council called an emergency session and ordered Elena's team to return to Luna Station immediately. The politicians and military leaders were terrified that the crystal activation had somehow infected the human population with alien thoughts. But Amy was beginning to suspect something much more extraordinary was happening. Dr. Kevin Walsh was running late-night experiments in his neuroscience lab on Orbital 7 when he noticed something that changed everything. The brain scans of humans who were experiencing these memory flashes showed neural activity in regions that were supposed to be inactive. Deep within the human brain were structures that no other known species possessed, complex networks of neurons that seemed designed for processing vast amounts of information across galactic distances. Kevin called Amy on Luna Station and shared his findings. The neural pathways that are activating are not random, he explained as he sent her the brain scan data. They follow specific patterns that suggest they were designed for a purpose. Whatever is happening to people is not some kind of mental breakdown. Their brains are accessing information that was already there, hidden in genetic memory. Amy studied the data and felt a chill run down her spine. The brain patterns were identical across different individuals who had never met and lived on different worlds. The memories they were experiencing were consistent in their details, showing the same ancient human civilization from different perspectives. On Earth, farmer Bill Davis was plowing his fields when he stopped suddenly and stared at the sky. He could see star patterns that were invisible to the naked eye and knew instinctively which systems contained habitable worlds. The knowledge came to him as naturally as breathing, as if he had studied those stars for centuries instead of spending his whole life growing crops in Iowa. Alana's team arrived at Luna Station 3 days after the crystal activation. They were immediately taken to a secure medical facility where teams of doctors and scientists examined them for any signs of alien influence or contamination. But the tests showed something unexpected. Their brains were functioning at levels far beyond normal human capacity, processing information with an efficiency that should have been impossible. Jacob Miller sat in the examination room and spoke fluently in dozens of languages that human linguists had never encountered. But somehow, every human who heard the recordings could understand his words perfectly. Lisa Chang drew mathematical equations that solved problems in quantum physics that had puzzled scientists for decades. Yet she had no memory of learning the formulas she was writing. The breakthrough came when Amy Foster realized that the activation on Kepler 442b had not added anything new to the human mind. Instead, it had removed barriers that were preventing humans from accessing knowledge that was already part of their genetic code. The crystal matrix had acted like a key, unlocking mental capabilities that had been sealed away for millions of years. Ryan Brooks was experiencing the most dramatic changes of all. The military commander found himself understanding strategic concepts that involved coordinating fleets across multiple star systems simultaneously. He could visualize battle formations in three-dimensional space and calculate the logistics of supplying armies on hundreds of different worlds at once. The knowledge was terrifying in its scope and precision. As more humans began experiencing full memory restoration, the pattern became clear. They were not remembering random events from some ancient alien civilization. They were remembering their own past, a time when humanity had spread across the galaxy and built the vast network of technology that still supported interstellar civilization today. The hyperspace lanes that allowed faster-than-light travel between human colonies had not been discovered by human scientists. They had been built by humans millions of years ago and forgotten. The communication networks that connected the scattered worlds of human space were not natural phenomena but artificial constructs created by the same ancient human civilization that had built the ruins on Kepler 442b. Amy published her findings in a report that sent shockwaves through the Colonial Council. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans were not a young species that had recently developed space travel. They were the descendants of the galaxy's most advanced civilization, a race that had voluntarily sealed away their own memories for reasons that were only beginning to become clear. On the mining station, Asteroid Belt Alpha, Supervisor Kate Wilson experienced a memory that explained everything. She saw herself standing in a chamber similar to the one Helena had found, but this time she was one of the architects making the decision to activate the memory seal. The choice had been made to protect the galaxy from a terrible threat, and humanity had sacrificed their own knowledge and power to ensure that other species could grow and develop safely. The memory seal had not been meant to last forever. It was designed to be broken when humanity was ready to reclaim their role as the galaxy's guardians, when they had learned enough wisdom to use their power responsibly. The crystal matrix on Kepler 442b had been waiting for millions of years for humans to find it and begin the process of awakening. As Elena studied the reports coming in from across human space, she realized that the discovery on Kepler 442b was just the beginning. The awakening memories were pointing toward other sites, other crystals that would need to be activated to complete the process. Humanity was remembering who they truly were, but the full truth was still hidden in the depths of their genetic memory, waiting to be unlocked. Ambassador Helen Carter had never seen the Galactic Council chambers in such chaos. Representatives from 12 major alien species filled the massive circular hall on Harmony Prime Station, and every single one of them looked terrified. The emergency session had been called within hours of the news from human space reaching the outer colonies, and Helen could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. She sat in the human delegation section and watched as Council Leader Vexthari of the crystalline Etherians called for order. The Etherian's translucent body pulsed with nervous energy as she addressed the assembly. Her voice carried the weight of ancient knowledge when she spoke through the translation devices. The time we have long feared has finally arrived, Vexthari announced. The sleeping giants are awakening. The genetic locks that have kept them dormant for millions of years are beginning to fail. We must decide quickly how to respond before they remember their true power. Helen felt a chill run through her body. The Etherians were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, with records going back over 2 million years. If they knew about humanity's past, then the situation was far more serious than anyone had realized. The Zephyrian delegate stood up next, his tall blue form shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Our creation. Myths speak of the first builders who came to our world when we were still primitive hunters. They taught us language and mathematics, showed us how to work metal and harness electricity. Then they vanished overnight, leaving only ruins and legends behind. Helen listened in growing amazement as one species after another shared similar stories. The reptilian Drakmiri told of the ancient shepherds who had guided their evolution from simple predators to a spacefaring civilization. The insectoid hive collective described the prime architects, who had built the first hyperspace beacons and then disappeared into myth. Every species had the same basic story with different details. An ancient race of builders had appeared in their prehistory, guided their development, and then vanished completely. The descriptions of these mysterious benefactors were always the same: bipedal beings with five-fingered hands and faces that showed complex emotions. "You are talking about humans," Helen said, standing up despite the diplomatic protocols that should have kept her quiet. "All of your creation myths are describing humans. But that is impossible, because our species only developed space travel 300 years ago." The chamber fell silent as every alien representative turned to look at her. Their expressions ranged from pity to fear, and Helen realized that she had just revealed how little humanity actually knew about their own past. Vexthari's crystalline form darkened as she prepared to speak. "Ambassador Carter, your species has been carefully monitored since you first left your home world. We have known about your true nature for decades, but we hoped that the genetic locks would hold forever. The discovery on Kepler 442b has changed everything." A massive holographic display activated in the center of the chamber, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of points were marked in red, each one representing a site where Elder One ruins had been discovered. Helen recognized many of the locations from archaeological reports, but there were far more sites than humanity had ever found. "These are all human constructions," Vexthari continued. "Your ancestors built the hyperspace network that allows faster-than-light travel. They created the communication relays that connect our worlds. They established the atmospheric processors that made barren planets habitable. The entire foundation of galactic civilization is built on technology that your species created millions of years ago." The Drakmiri representative hissed softly before speaking. "Our legends say that the ancient shepherds left because they had grown too powerful for their own good. They feared that their knowledge would corrupt them, so they chose to forget everything and start over as a young species on a single world." Helen's mind raced as she tried to process what she was hearing. If this was true, then the awakening memories that humans across the colonies were experiencing were not some kind of alien influence. They were recovering their own lost heritage, remembering a past that had been deliberately erased. "Why are you all so afraid?" she asked. "If humans were benevolent guides in the past, why do you fear their return now?" The answer came from an unexpected source. A small, furry creature that Helen had never seen before stepped forward from the observer section. It was a member of the Whisper Folk, one of the most secretive species in the galaxy. "Because power corrupts," the creature said in a voice barely above a whisper, "your ancestors understood this truth. They sealed away their memories, not just to protect themselves, but to protect all of us. They knew that no species should have the power to reshape reality itself. But the seals are breaking, and soon they will remember everything." Vexthari activated another display, this one showing military deployment patterns across the galaxy. Helen was shocked to see that several species had been quietly building up their fleets for years, positioning ships near human colonies and trade routes. "Some among us believe that we should act before the awakening is complete," Vexthari explained. "The Corvin Empire has already moved 3 battle fleets into position near your outer colonies. The Stellar Confederation is debating a preemptive strike on Earth itself. They fear that once humans fully remember their capabilities, no force in the galaxy will be able to stop them." Helen stood up again, her voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "You are talking about genocide based on fears of something that might happen. Humans have shown no signs of aggression or conquest. We have been peaceful members of the galactic community for centuries." "Because you did not remember what you are capable of," the Drakmiri representative replied. "But that is changing. Our intelligence reports indicate that humans are already beginning to understand technologies that should be impossible. How long before they remember how to build world killers or star destroyers?" The debate continued for hours as species after species shared their fears and concerns. Some argued for immediate military action while others counseled patience and observation. But Helen could see that the majority of the council was leaning towards some kind of intervention before humanity could fully awaken. As the session finally ended, Vexthari approached Helen privately. "Your people were once the greatest force for good that the galaxy has ever known," she said sadly. "But they were also the most dangerous. The choice they made to seal away their memories saved us all from their potential for destruction. Now, that choice is being undone, and we must decide whether to trust in their wisdom or protect ourselves from their power." Helen left the council chambers with a terrible understanding of what was coming. The galaxy that humanity thought they knew was built on the foundations of their own forgotten civilization. And now that they were beginning to remember, every other species in the galaxy was preparing for war. The first attack came without warning. Colony ships from the Corvin Empire dropped out of hyperspace near the human settlement on New Terra and opened fire immediately. The Colonial Defense Force was caught completely off guard, their small patrol. Ships no match for the advanced alien warships that surrounded them. But something unexpected happened as the battle began. Defense Coordinator Major Susan Hayes felt a strange calm wash over her mind as enemy missiles streaked toward the colony. Suddenly, she could see the entire battle in her head like a three-dimensional chess game, understanding tactical formations that spanned light years and involved fleets of thousands of ships moving in perfect coordination. All ships formed defensive. "Pattern Omega-7, she commanded, even though no such pattern existed in any human military manual. The colonial pilots followed her orders instinctively, their own awakening memories, guiding them as they arranged their ships in a complex formation that seemed to bend space itself around them. The Corvin missiles struck the formation and simply disappeared, absorbed by energy fields that the human ships were somehow generating without any visible technology. The alien commanders stared in disbelief as their most powerful weapons had no effect whatsoever on the small human fleet. On Mars Colony, engineer Peter Johnson was working frantically to repair the defense systems when the Drakmiri attack fleet arrived. The reptilian ships began bombarding the surface installations, but Peter found himself building impossible devices from scrap metal and broken electronics. His hands moved with practiced skill as he assembled energy projectors and force field generators using principles that his conscious mind did not understand. Within hours, the Mars defense grid was operating at levels that exceeded anything in human technology. The planet's surface shimmered with protective barriers that deflected the alien bombardment back at the attacking ships. The Drakmiri fleet retreated in confusion as their own weapons turned against them. Dr. Elena Rodriguez and her team had been recalled from Kepler 442b, but the journey back to human space became a desperate race as alien fleets moved to intercept them. Jacob Miller was translating ancient star charts that appeared in his mind, guiding them through hyperspace routes that did not exist on any known map. Lisa Chong was modifying the ship's engines using equations that rewrote the laws of physics. As she understood them, the UE's horizon emerged from hyperspace inside a massive structure that none of them remembered entering. They were surrounded by what looked like a hollow planet, its inner surface covered with cities and installations that stretched beyond the horizon. Ancient human technology hummed to life around them as their ship was gently guided to a landing platform. "This is the Master Archive," Elena said, even though she had no memory of ever hearing that name before. "Everything we need to know is here. The complete history of what we were and why we chose to forget." Meanwhile, the war was spreading across the galaxy as more alien species joined the preemptive strike against humanity. But every battle went the same way. Human colonies that should have been defenseless against advanced alien fleets suddenly revealed capabilities that defied explanation. Mining stations transformed into fortress worlds overnight. their workers building defense systems from raw materials using knowledge they had never learned. The turning point came when dormant human installations across the galaxy began reactivating themselves. Asteroids that had drifted in space for millions of years unfolded into massive battleships the size of small moons. Planetary defense systems that scientists had mistaken for natural geological formations came online, wielding weapons that could reshape matter at the atomic level. On Earth, farmer Bill Davis stood in his fields and watched as the sky filled with points of light. Ancient satellites were powering up in orbit, their hulls invisible to human sensors, but clearly visible to his awakening perception. The entire solar system was surrounded by a defensive network that had been waiting for millions of years to be activated. The alien fleets found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. The hyperspace lanes themselves began working against them, redirecting their ships to empty regions of space or trapping them in temporal loops. The communication networks that connected their worlds carried human voices speaking in languages that bypassed their translation systems and spoke directly to their minds. Dr. Amy Foster was documenting the changes in human brain activity when she made a startling discovery. The neural patterns of awakening humans were not just individual minds recovering lost memories. They were connecting to each other, forming a vast network of consciousness that spanned the entire galaxy. Every human was becoming part of a collective intelligence that could process information on a cosmic scale. In the Master Archive, Elina's team discovered the truth about humanity's past. The ancient humans had not been conquerors or rulers in any traditional sense. They had been gardeners, carefully nurturing younger species and guiding their evolution toward intelligence and wisdom. When a galactic plague had threatened all life, humans had used their advanced technology to scatter themselves across time and space, sealing their memories to ensure they could not accidentally cause harm while they recovered. The infrastructure of galactic civilization was not just built by humans. It was alive with human consciousness, embedded so deeply into the fabric of space itself that removing it would cause the collapse of everything the younger species had built. The hyperspace network, the communication systems, the atmospheric processors, even the protective barriers around inhabited worlds were all extensions of human awareness. As more humans accessed the archive's knowledge, they began to understand the true scope of their heritage. They were not just a species that had developed space travel. They were the galaxy itself, the living consciousness that maintained the delicate balance between countless worlds and civilizations. The alien coalition's final desperate assault on the archive was met not with violence, but with revelation. As their fleets approached the ancient human stronghold, they found their weapon systems shutting down and their ships being gently guided to landing platforms. Human voices spoke to them in their own languages, explaining the truth that their legends had preserved, but their fear had distorted. The war ended not with conquest, but with understanding. The aliens realized that destroying humanity would mean destroying the very foundation of their own civilizations. The humans they feared were not returning as conquerors, but as the parents they had always been, ready to resume their role as guardians of the galaxy they had never truly left. Captain Alex Morgan stood at the center of the nexus point and felt the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on his consciousness. The massive station hung in the void at the galaxy's heart, its crystalline structures pulsing with the rhythm of billions of worlds. He remembered now that he had helped design this place millions of years ago, back when humanity first took on the responsibility of shepherding galactic civilization. Around him, other awakened humans worked at control, stations that managed the fundamental forces holding everything together. The hyperspace network, the protective barriers around inhabited worlds, the atmospheric processors that maintained life on thousands of planets. All of it flowed through the nexus like blood, through a vast living body. Dr. Elena Rodriguez approached. him with urgent news from the outer sensors. The Etherian coalition is making their final approach, she reported. Vexthari is leading the assault personally with every ship they could gather. They truly believe that destroying the Nexus will prevent human domination of the galaxy. Alex nodded sadly as he watched the alien fleet advance on the long-range displays. The coalition had grown desperate as more humans remembered their true nature, and their fear had driven them to attempt the one action that would doom every civilized world in the galaxy. They did not understand that the Nexus was not a weapon or a control center, but the heart of the living system that kept their worlds habitable. They think we built all of this to rule them, Alex said as he monitored the approaching fleet. They cannot see that we became all of this to serve them. Every hyperspace lane, every communication relay, every piece of technology that makes their civilizations possible is part of us. We did not create an empire. We became the galaxy itself. The coalition fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect battle formation, their weapons charging as they prepared to destroy what they saw as the source of human power. But instead of defensive fire or threatening messages, they received something they had not expected. Every ship in their fleet was filled with the gentle sound of human voices speaking in perfect versions of their own languages. Ambassador Helen Carter's voice reached them first, transmitted through communication systems that the aliens had always assumed were natural phenomena. "We know you are afraid," she said, her words carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. "Your legends told you that the Elder Ones were dangerous, and in some ways they were right. But they also told you that we were teachers and protectors, and that part was true as well." On the flagship of the Etherian fleet, Vexthari felt her crystalline form trembling as more human voices joined the transmission. They were not threatening or commanding, but explaining, sharing the truth that had been hidden for millions of years in words that went directly to her mind and heart. Dr. Amy Foster's voice spoke of the psychological research that had revealed the truth about human consciousness. "We did not disappear or die out as your legends suggested. We chose to spread ourselves so thin across space and time that we became invisible, embedding our awareness into every system that supports galactic life. We became the infrastructure itself, the living foundation that your civilizations were built upon." The coalition fleet slowed as the human voices continued their explanation. On every ship, alien crew members were beginning to understand what destroying the Nexus would really mean. The hyperspace network would collapse instantly, stranding billions of beings on worlds that could no longer communicate or trade with each other. The atmospheric processors would fail, leaving countless planets uninhabitable. The protective barriers that shielded inhabited worlds from cosmic radiation would disappear. Professor Jacob Miller's voice carried the weight of linguistic analysis as he spoke. "Your creation myths preserved the memory of our partnership, but fear distorted the message over millions of years. We were never your masters or your gods. We were your partners in the great work of building a galaxy where intelligence could flourish safely. The choice to seal our memories was not made in fear of our own power, but in recognition that the greatest gift we could give you was the chance to grow independently." Lisa Chong's voice added the scientific perspective that made everything clear. "The technology you see as evidence of our dominance is actually evidence of our service. Every piece of the galactic infrastructure was designed not to control, but to enable. We built the hyperspace network so that young species could explore and meet each other safely. We created the communication systems so that knowledge could be shared across impossible distances. We established the environmental controls so that life could thrive on worlds that would otherwise be barren. The alien fleet had stopped completely. Now, their weapons powering down as the full implications of the human explanation sank in. Vexthari opened a communication channel to the Nexus, her voice filled with a mixture of wonder and shame. "If this is true," she transmitted, Then we have been preparing to commit the greatest act of genocide in galactic history. Destroying. The Nexus would not just kill humans, but would doom every species that depends on the systems you maintain. Alex Morgan's response carried the gentle authority of ancient wisdom. The choice has always been yours to make. We sealed our memories, precisely so that you would have the freedom to accept or reject our guidance. But we hoped that when the time came for us to return, you would remember the partnership we once shared instead of only the fear. A demonstration that followed was not one of power but of healing. Across the galaxy, humans began openly using their restored abilities not to conquer or control, but to repair and improve. Worlds that had been damaged by industrial development were restored to their natural beauty in moments. Ships that had been destroyed in the recent battles were rebuilt, with improvements that made them safer and more efficient. Alien crew members who had been injured in the fighting found their wounds healing as human. Consciousness touched their minds with gentle care. On the Etherian flagship, Vexthari experienced something that changed her understanding of everything. Human awareness flowed through her crystalline body, not invading or controlling, but offering knowledge and healing that she was free to accept or reject. For the first time in millions of years, she felt the touch of the minds that had guided her species' evolution from primitive crystal formations to spacefaring intelligence. The fear that had driven the coalition to war dissolved as they realized the truth. Humans had not returned to reclaim an empire because they had never stopped being the invisible foundation that supported galactic civilization. The awakening was not about human dominance, but about partnership, the restoration of the ancient, collaboration between the gardeners and the garden they had lovingly tended. Alex Morgan spoke one final time to the assembled fleet. The test was never whether we could remember our power, but whether we could choose wisdom over control. By sealing our memories and allowing you to grow independently, we proved that we deserved to be trusted with the role of galactic shepherds. Now we ask you to join us not as subjects, but as partners in continuing the great work we began together millions of years ago.